We can now bring in Henrietta Levin, a senior fellow at the Freeman Chair in China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Now, if you saw Donald Trump's visit to South Korea, you surely had seen that they laid on the charm pretty thick. Does it seem to you like they drove a tough bargain in securing this trade agreement, which they have just seemed to have announced, although we don't have many details, I know?
Well, we never know for sure when Donald Trump announces a trade agreement, whether it exists or whether he wants it to.
Hmm.
But look, I think there has been real progress in the U.S. and Koreans coming closer together to achieve a deal that is so important, not only for South Korea's economy, but it's for its security position as well, because the relationship with the U.S. is so critical to South Korea's broader standing in the region and its security vis-a-vis its nuclear-armed northern neighbor. I would also say I think it's really important that this deal at least did see some progress before Trump steps into his conversation with Chinese President Xi on Thursday. It's so important for the U.S. to be in a good place with its allies before it steps into that conversation with an adversary.
I want to talk about the North and China in just a second, but also Donald Trump wanted to see this massive investment in the United States from the South Koreans. And just a couple of weeks ago, we saw that ICE raid where we saw South Korean nationals shackled and deported from the United States. So how do you put the two together?
Look, that ICE raid in which South Korean workers working to reinvigorate American manufacturing, which is exactly what Donald Trump had asked them to do, then being deported in such a humiliating way has done real damage to U.S. standing in South Korea. It really has continued to reverberate across the South Korean political spectrum and was seen as a real insult to an important partner, especially when they were trying to do exactly what Donald Trump wanted them to do. But at the same time, the South Koreans need a strong relationship with the U.S., and they will have to move ahead and try and forge progress with this deal.
Let's talk about North Korea, because unlike Donald Trump during his first term, when he did engage with Kim Jong-un, little to show for it besides, a lot of letters and that hand-holding where he did cross the DMZ. Unlike then, we have Kim Jong-un, who's formed this bromance, if you will, with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. So things are a lot different for the North Koreans now than they were before.
It is, and you can see Kim Jong-un's confidence, including when he went to Beijing just a few weeks ago to participate in China's big military parade. And I think the Russians especially have really taken a dangerous course of action in emboldening Kim Jong-un. And the Russians don't even talk about denuclearization anymore. At least China still plays lip service to the importance of a denuclearized peninsula. The Russians don't care. They just want to get Korean ammunition for the war in Ukraine, and they're willing to accept pretty much any consequence, including quite destabilizing ones, on the Korean peninsula as a result.
Yesterday, you saw Donald Trump in Japan. Japan's incoming prime minister, very giddy alongside the U.S. president when he was talking to U.S. troops. Are Asian states like Japan and South Korea so eager to do whatever it takes, like their European counterparts, to be honest, to keep Donald Trump engaged in their part of the world?
Well, yes and no. For both Japan and for South Korea, the U.S. alliance, it's too big to fail. It must work for these nations to feel secure in their neighborhood. But you also see both Japan and South Korea investing deeply in their partnerships with Europe, with other Indo-Pacific partners. So there's some hedging going on as well. But I will say, I think the new Japanese prime minister was very effective in forging what will be an important relationship with Donald Trump. And we can remember from Trump's first term, then Japanese Prime Minister Abe, who was a mentor of the current leader, was very effective in helping Trump maintain a more stable path in his relationship, not just with Japan, but with Asia more broadly. And I think we're all hoping we may see that again with the new leadership.
Now, tomorrow, attention will be shifting to that high stakes face-to-face with Xi Jinping. What will you be looking out for?
Well, look, it seems like both sides want to establish a longer term period of stability in the relationship. Now, what is longer term in the year 2025? At least it seems like both sides are talking about a year-long delay on implementation of China's new, very expansive regulations on rare earths, perhaps the pause on very high tariffs that we saw earlier this spring, what was effectively a trade embargo.
Mm.
Perhaps that will also be extended beyond this like 90-day window that we've seen repeatedly until now. But ultimately, it seems like both sides are talking about really managing the fallout of the trade war itself. I
Mm.
have not seen any indications that they're getting into the actual underlying economic imbalances that the trade war was ostensibly launched to address.
Has Xi Jinping found Donald Trump's Achilles heel by going after rare earth minerals? And also at the same time, what is China going to do now that these two Russian energy firms have been sanctioned? Because that's also something that Donald Trump wants to see, that Russia not getting any revenue to continue to fund its war in Ukraine. I mean, he went after New Delhi in a certain way, but he can't go after China the same way because it's a different sort of level of partnership.
Well, he could. He doesn't want to.
Mm.
I think that you see um, President Xi in China having made a deep commitment to President Putin and his relationship with Russia. It is simply impossible to imagine China limiting its partnership, its financial support for the Russians, unless there's a threat of real consequences from the US side. And I think if Donald Trump went into this meeting, if he threatened credible financial sanctions, perhaps on the Chinese financial institutions that are responsible for supporting the Russian military, then we might see some action because, there's no Chinese bank that can survive without access to the US financial system, but you would have to put that real pressure on the table. And it seems like Trump's priority right now is to have a good meeting that feels nice, build a warm relationship with Xi, and achieve this broader stabilization. So it's difficult for me to imagine much progress on that issue, on the issue of China's support for the Russian war effort coming out of this meeting in Korea.